additional lines just $30 each. Click, call, or visit a Spectrum store today.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
I'm Josh Robin. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. President Trump is set to announce a new round of tariffs today, dubbed Liberation Day by the White House. The duties are set to be imposed on trade the White House deems unfair. The goal is to boost American manufacturing. The Trump administration has been tight-lipped on exact details. What we do know is that 25% tariffs go into effect for foreign-made cars and parts tomorrow. That will raise the cost for American consumers. Stocks were trading lower this morning as investors hold their breath for what's next. Wisconsin Supreme Court retains the liberal majority. Susan Crawford won out over Trump-backed and conservative Brad Schimmel. The race broke funding records as Elon Musk poured in millions of dollars for Schimmel. Billionaire megadonor George Soros and other Democrats backed Crawford. Republicans in Florida are retaining 2 seats in the House of Representatives. Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine beat out Democratic challengers, though underperforming Trump's November margins in the same districts. And New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been cleared of any wrongdoing. A federal judge dismissing the corruption charges brought by the U.S. Justice Department during the Biden administration. Adams was accused of taking trips and campaign funds from Turkish officials. He has said that he had done nothing wrong. And that is your Spectrum News in 90 on this Wednesday.
Hello, everyone. Meteorologist Scott Dean, where it looks like we're in for a major outbreak of severe weather across portions of the nation. This is from the southern Great Lakes all the way through the Mississippi Valley into Texas, with a rare high risk for severe weather in the Mississippi Valley. We're talking about large hail, damaging winds, and some tornadoes. Some of those tornadoes could be quite strong and long track. We'll have more details coming up.
Good day, I'm Josh Robin. It is so-called Liberation Day in America as President Trump is set to roll out sweeping trade barriers. According to the White House, the plan is to impose reciprocal tariffs on 20 nations whose trade practices have been deemed unfair. Details remain scarce at this hour. What we do know is that the plan goes into effect at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Markets open lower today on fears of a wider trade war. Friends and foes alike are concerned about what the tariffs could do to the international economy.
A trade war is in nobody's interests, and the country deserves, and we will take, a calm, pragmatic approach. That's why constructive talks are progressing to agree a wider economic prosperity deal with the U.S.
And Spectrum's Daniel Grimes joining me now from the White House. Daniel, as we know them, walk us through some of the details on the president's plan.
Yeah, Josh, so we know the president has said he's going to be kind and generous to other nations, in fact, kinder than they've been to the U.S. And we also know these tariffs will go into effect at 4 p.m. today immediately. But that's really all we know right now. We have to wait and see what the president announces. But here's what else we know in terms of tariffs, that there are 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports already in effect. We also know that the 25% tariffs on all Canadian and Mexican goods are in effect as well. Those were delayed twice, and again, April 2nd, they are going into effect. And then we also know on foreign cars, there's a 25% tariff going into effect tomorrow. And we also know car part tariff is slated for May 3rd at the latest. And so that's really the tariff news that we know right now. We know the president is looking to bring back manufacturing to the country. He's also said he wants to slow and stop illegal drugs, including fentanyl, into the country. country. And so he also slated this event as making America wealthy again. And so those are the reasons he's listed for the tariffs. But we also know they have caused the stock market to have their worst first quarter since 2022. So a lot of Americans are nervous about these tariffs, Josh.
Okay, yeah, the NASDAQ in particular. Daniel, how are other countries responding to this tariff announcement that's coming?
Well, there's been negotiations back and forth, but even our allies like the United Kingdom say they plan to respond.
Our decisions will always be guided by our national interest, and that's why we have prepared for all eventualities, and we will rule nothing out.
Now, the White House press secretary even said yesterday that they're open to negotiating, so we'll have to wait and see what takes shape, Josh.
Daniel Grimes. Thank you, Daniel. President Trump's announcement has the potential of further escalating a trade war that began with the tariffs he announced in the first weeks of his second term. Spectrum's Angie Gonzalez has a look at how some countries are responding to his so-called Liberation Day.
This is an amazing day.
In February, President Donald Trump laid the groundwork for today's announcement on retaliatory tariffs.
The world has taken advantage of the United States.
Since then, countries have been working on a response. Right now, those plans vary in part on whether or not they've already been targeted by other U.S. tariffs in recent weeks. Canada has, and its foreign minister says America's northern neighbor could unleash an additional $100 billion worth of counter tariffs on U.S. products coming into Canada.
We didn't launch a trade war against the U.S. The U.S. Decided to put 25% tariffs against all our products.
Mexico is in the same boat, but its president says we don't believe in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, because that always leads to a bad situation. The United Kingdom is also taking a measured approach, but not ruling anything out. The European Union is reassuring its 27 member countries that it holds the cards. In that group is Ireland, who last year sent almost a third of its
Good afternoon. I'm Errol Lewis, and you are watching special coverage on Spectrum News. It is 4:06 in the nation's capital. That's where President Donald Trump will soon be announcing reciprocal tariffs on many nations, potentially of the country's trading partners. It's a day that the president has called Liberation Day. There at the White House, they are cheering for him as he heads to the podium. Let's listen in.
Thank you. Nice crowd. What a good-looking group of people. Well, we have some very, very good news today, and a lot of good things are happening for our country. Please sit down. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back. We're going to come back very strongly. We're pleased to be joined on this momentous occasion by Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D., thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Where are you, J.D.? No, that wasn't too hard to find. I was looking, you know, he likes to take a low-key attitude, so it'd usually be sitting right in front. He's gaining a lot of confidence, Mike, isn't he? And nearly my entire cabinet is here, as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, who's done an amazing job. And with the great success we had last night in Florida, we have a majority of 7. And 7's like a lot when we had it at 1, right? You've done a fantastic job. And many of the members of the House and Senate are with us. Senators, Congressmen, thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it. For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries, and in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards, and created filthy pollution havens. They were absolutely filthy, but they always came to us and they said, we're violating, we should pay for it. It's all detailed in a very big report by the U.S. Trade Representative on foreign trade barriers, and I'll just hold it up for you. It's available, and you don't have to pay too much. As I understand it, you'll pay nothing. It's a lot of work for something, actually, because it's a special book. It's frankly, it's very upsetting when you read it, when you see what people have been doing to us for 30 years. This all happened with no response from the United States of America, none whatsoever. But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced for so many years. The United States charges other countries only a 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher prices, like 60%. India charges 70%. Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Korea, Japan, and very many other nations. As a result of these colossal trade barriers, 81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Thank you. Brian, I'd like to have you come up here for a second, okay? I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than anybody. Brian, say a few words, please, would you?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
It's a great honor to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in Macomb County, known as the home of the Reagan Democrats. My first vote for president was for Ronald Reagan. I thought that was going to be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along. I have watched my entire life, I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized, and Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a great guy. He got it right from the beginning. He got it before almost anybody else. This group over there, they got it too. And you know, we won the state of Michigan. We won almost all of them, but we won Michigan by a lot, and I want to just thank you all. The auto workers were fantastic. The Teamsters were fantastic. Everyone was pretty good, I will tell you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're going to be very happy very soon, and you probably see what's happening with all of the, not only car companies, but car companies in particular. You see it with all of the ones they're moving, they're announcing day in, day out. You're seeing it. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Brutalized. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, oh, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country. And with countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say you got to work for yourselves, and you got to? This is why we have the big deficits. This is why we have that amount of debt that's been placed on our heads over the last number of years, and we're really not taking it anymore. Through non-tariff barriers, the European Union bans imports of most American poultry. You understand? They say, we want to send you our cars, we want to send you everything, but we're not going to take anything that you have. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say. And China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50%. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And Japan Our friend charges us 700%, but that's because they don't want us selling rice and other things. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary? Agriculture, great job you did on eggs, by the way. The egg prices came down 50%. You got them down 50%. Once we got involved, they were going through the sky. The egg prices, they were going through the sky, and you did a fantastic job. Now we have lots of eggs, and they're much cheaper, down about 59% now, and they're going down further. We charge 2.8% for so many things that other countries are charging 200%, 300%, and 400% for. If imposing tariffs and protective barriers made nations poor, then every country on earth would be racing to eliminate these policies, and China would be the first on line. They run a very strong country, but they're not first in line, and the American people are paying a very big price. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to give it to, and how much. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. They tried to bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing could have been done. It took years and years to get out of that depression, far longer than even FDR had that office right over there for a long period of time. The ramp system, that's rather intricate, was built because of him, and every time you walk up, you think of him, and he did a great job in many ways, but it lasted long beyond his terms, as you know. But it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because they've taken so much of our wealth away from us. We're not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first. And I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first. In Sleepy Joe Biden's last year in office, the United States hemorrhaged 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and the number was going through the roof at levels never seen before. And our trade deficit reached a record $1.2 trillion, which is unheard of. Since the beginning of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made, it was a horror show. I was able to terminate it. They all said you'd never be able to get it out. We had to get approval from Congress to get it terminated. We had to live with that deal. It was the worst trade deal ever made by far. But since the very beginning of NAFTA, our country lost 90,000 factories. Think of what that is, 90,000. Think about putting a map up and putting tax on it. You wouldn't have enough room. 90,000. I said, is that possible? We had it checked 4 different times, and it was actually somewhat higher than that. And 5 million manufacturing jobs were lost while racking up trade deficits of $19 trillion. That was the worst trade deal ever made. as a result of these gigantic losses, foreign nations now own $26 trillion more of American assets than think of this, than the Americans own of their own foreign assets or other foreign assets. The United States can no longer produce enough antibiotics to treat our sick. We have a tremendous problem. We have to go to foreign countries to treat our sick. If anything ever happened from a war standpoint, we wouldn't be able to do it. We import virtually all of our computers, phones, televisions, and electronics. We used to dominate the field, and now we import it all from different countries. A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you got ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now. That's what happened. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries. We didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat in that Oval Office right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, you know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago, when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs, and they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand, and the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. Trade is not fair. And he said, I know that. I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man. But he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left on the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49%. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on. Pakistan, 58%. Sri Lanka, 88%. So what we're doing is we're taking not the full, we could take the full 88%. Thanks a lot, Howard. He's doing a very good job. How's he doing, all right? I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long. He's going to put it, it's going to follow you down with the wind. I brought a hat just in case it got too windy, but here's, would anybody like a hat? I'm not giving it to a cabinet. I'm giving it to the auto workers. Come here. Thank you, fellas. Get it. That's it. That's it. They deserve it more than our cabinet. Our cabinet has plenty of hats. But you see the numbers. The numbers are so disproportionate. They're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity. And there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in, and they're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept. To any company that objects to our common sense reciprocal tariffs, again, reciprocal, back and forth, back and forth. And I call this kind reciprocal. This is not full reciprocal. This is kind reciprocal. But what we do is we cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple if they complain. If you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America. And we've seen companies coming in like we've never seen before. Likewise to all of the foreign presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, ambassadors, and everyone else who will soon be calling to ask for exemptions from these tariffs. I say, terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us, and start buying tens of billions of dollars of American goods. Tariffs give our country protection against those that would do us economic harm, and many people were looking to do us economic harm. Maybe not so obviously, but they were doing tremendous economic harm. But even more importantly, they will give us growth. These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before, and it'll be something very special to watch. I am so looking forward, and Brian, it's going to happen even faster than you said. You know, you might say, but it's already started. It's already started. Work's already begun on plants all around the country, and you see that as before. These are big, rich companies. We have $61 billion started on a big plant going up. It's going to be announced over the next 2 days, and they already started work. Many of these the biggest companies in the world, they've committed to build, build, build. We're going to build, 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 sir. And they came here to see me, and they wanted to know if they could have a press conference. I do as many as I can. I'm pretty busy trying to stop Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We got to stop that. We got to stop the Houthis, which were making tremendous. They like shooting ships down and out of the water, sinking ships. They get a kick out of it, but they're not getting such a kick out of it now, are they, Mr. Secretary? They're not getting such a kick out of that now. But here are just a short list of some of the companies that have already announced and committed to investment. And this is a company that built its factories and its plants in China. Apple is going to spend $500 billion. They never spent money like that here. They're going to build their plants here. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. NVIDIA, a hot company, is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. They just announced. TSMC, the biggest, most important company in the world of chips from Taiwan, with no investment from us, is investing $200 billion. And they said the reason was, number one, the election of November 5th, and number two, the tariffs. They don't want to pay the tariffs, and the way they're not paying it is to build their plant here. So we're going to go from almost no percentage. We used to have 100% of the chip market. Now it's all in Taiwan. Almost all of it's in Taiwan. A couple of other countries, but mostly in Taiwan. And think of it. We had 100%. We lost it because of people in that office that didn't do their job. They allowed it to be stolen from us. Johnson & Johnson, great company, $55 billion. Eli Lilly, $27 billion. Meta is investing $500 billion. Wow. DeMac is investing $20 billion. CMA, CGM, $20 billion. And then you have Merck and Clarios, Stellantis, General Motors, GE Aerospace, Honda, Nissan, Hyundai are all putting in billions and billions of dollars, and they're committed 100%. So. And we've never had, and this is after 2.5 months. This is after just a short, this all took place as soon as we came out with what everybody wanted to do. You know, I watched a gentleman today on television. He used to work with Lee Iacocca, a very respected automobile person, and he said, you know, because they're asking people, and they try and get as many negative people as they can, but they can't find them too much. It's pretty hard to find in terms of what we're doing, especially when they see all this investment. They said, so tell me, what do you think of what Trump is doing from the automobile standpoint? He said, I can't believe it. Somebody is finally, he's an older guy, real pro, really top guy, with Lee Iacocca. He said, I never thought I'd see the day when this would happen, where somebody had the courage to go and do what has to be done. This is transforming our nation. Our entire nation is going to be transformed, not only with the cars, but on every single other item that's built. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. And he said that so beautifully today. In fact, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get tape, and Bruce, I'm going to get that tape and I'm going to send it to you out in Long Island, and you're going to play it for the people and all your union workers and your non-union workers out there. You got a pretty even split. But we have, so far, it looks like we're going to have about $6 trillion of investments, and you wouldn't do that in years in this country over the last number of years, $6 trillion, and that's going to be much higher by the end of the year. And think of what $6 trillion is. You wouldn't have even a small percentage of that under this other system. We're going to be an entirely different country, and it's going to be fantastic for the workers. It's going to be fantastic for everyone. There will never have been a transformation of a country like the transformation that's already happening in the United States of America. It's an incredible thing to watch, and it's incredible to meet with the top people, people that you read about, very wealthy people or people that are great managers and executives and presidents of big public companies, and to watch the enthusiasm they have now that they didn't have. They gave up on our country. They went to foreign countries and they built. Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before, with jobs and money to follow, and it's really beautiful. In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, you know, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. You know, it's like I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years. From the day of my election, the stock market went up in my first term 88%, with NASDAQ going up 155%, more than any president has ever had in any term in office, by far. And I think we're going to blow that away. And maybe the numbers won't show, but I think they're going to show much better than even those numbers. But what you're going to see is you're going to see activity, that empty, dead sites, factories that are falling down. Those factories will be knocked down, and they're going to have brand new factories built in their place. They're not only talking about renovating, they're talking about brand new, the best anywhere in the world, the biggest anywhere in the world. I have a friend who builds car plants, and I said, I want to see the biggest and the best. He said, well, we have to go to Mexico. I said, no, I want to see it in the United States. He said, we're not building them in there. This is a year and a half ago during the campaign. He said, we're not building it. You'd have to go to Mexico. When I was starting to decide to run, and I went to number one in the polls very rapidly, I want to say, like, let's say in the first hour. And then shortly thereafter, it looked like I was going to win, and the fake news.
You just heard President Trump announce that there will be 25% tariffs on foreign-made autos and a number of other reciprocal tariffs across the board to many, many nations. He held up a chart along a complicated set of numbers. We're going to be sorting through it for the next few days and weeks, I believe. There's some early market reaction, but joining me now for some political analysis, we've got political anchors Holly Gregory and Alex Cohen joining us, and we have anchor and chief national political reporter Josh Robin with me on set here. Let's start, though, with Washington reporter Daniel Grimes. He is live at the White House, where this event is still taking place in the Rose Garden. And Daniel, this idea of the across-the-board tariffs is not really coming as a surprise, right? I mean, this has been something that he's been talking about on the campaign trail since taking office in January. Are they expected to take effect immediately? And what reaction should we be expecting?
Well, in fact, it goes back even much further than that. In fact, the Trump administration has been plugging something from the Oprah Winfrey show back in the 80s when then just Donald Trump, before he was president, was talking about how other countries are taking advantage of the U.S. And so, yes, Errol, we're seeing the president there announce a flat 10% rate on all the goods coming into the country, and then a more targeted approach to the countries where we have the biggest trade deficit. Now, initially, we were told they were going to go into effect immediately. He said during that speech it's going to take place at midnight, along with the 25% auto tariff on foreign cars that is also going to take place at midnight tomorrow. And again, that's just meaning Americans are going to have to brace for higher prices. Now, the president is doing this, saying he wants to bring manufacturing back to the country and help close the deficit, but economists say it's actually going to potentially lead to job losses and, of course, higher prices. Now, the president has acknowledged that Americans will feel that short-term pain, but a longer-term benefit. Errol.
Okay, thanks very much, Daniel. Let's go out to Alex in Southern California. So, Alex, the White House is saying that these tariffs are going to boost revenue, give a boost in particular to manufacturing. But, of course, there's a lot of concern out there. I know the big shipyards out there where a lot of these goods come in and out of the United States, they're wondering what is going to happen, and it could, in fact, cost us a lot of jobs.
That's right, Errol, and the truth is that we just don't know yet. I mean, the impact of this will be huge and felt in many ways. Let's, for example, talk about booze for a moment, shall we? California, of course, is a serious producer of wine. Now, on the one hand, when you talk about tariffs and this reciprocal tariff, our wine goes out to all sorts of countries. There's real concern about this, that this could really shrink the demand for that. On the other hand, internally, if wines from places like France and Italy suddenly become a lot more, New Zealand, which was on that list the president shared today, if those become a lot more expensive here in the U.S., that could very much be a boon for California winemakers, increasing their domestic market. I also want to point out the tech sector here, which on the one hand, it may not seem necessarily immediately impacted by this, but so many of the parts that they come from places like Vietnam, Thailand, China, and it'll be very interesting to see what sort of impact this might all have on a huge and very lucrative industry, Errol.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And we just had two special elections in Florida. I know you folks were up reporting on it all yesterday. Republicans won. These were very red districts, of course. The margin changed a little bit. But I guess my question is, was the economy a factor? Was it something that they were talking about in those districts? Is this a new reality that Donald Trump is introducing today a part of the political discussion?
Well, I would say that certainly it's being discussed, and the impacts of the tariffs and what might that mean on the economy, particularly with our Canadians here in Florida. Florida is by far and away the #1 destination for Canadian tourism. We have snowbirds here who spend a good part of the year, and this tariff issue is really kind of creating a family feud with our friends and neighbors because, again, they do live here most of the year. In fact, just yesterday, the Canadian government paid to put up billboards all over our state that say taxes are tariffs. And that's not the only thing that has Canadians a little bit on edge. They have taken great exception to Trump saying a 51st state to make them that. They've also put this new rule in the Trump administration that Canadians, if they're here more than 30 days, which most are, they spend a good part of the year, they have to register with immigration. That's something they haven't had to do before. So there's some tension and there is some discussion on the economy. Now, I would caution reading too much into those two special elections. I mean, even though the margins were improved by Democrats, they still lost by double digits, and they outspent the candidates. The Republicans who didn't think they had to put any money into it. Democrats really put a lot of money into those races. But some lessons have been learned going into the midterms for Republicans, and including what we saw in Wisconsin with the judicial race, what we saw recently with Democrats upsetting a state Senate race in Pennsylvania. And that is they are really paying attention to these low propensity voters. Republicans courted these new voters that came out and voted for Trump. But Republicans are finding out that without his name on a ballot, these low propensity voters are not turning out. And in the meantime, we're discovering on the other side for Democrats that they are highly motivated. They are thirsty for a win here, and that Elon Musk is a force multiplier when it comes to turning out Democrats. So I would expect going into the midterms, as popular as Musk and Doge is on the right, I don't think you'll see any tight districts where it's really competitive, where the Republican candidate is going to ask Musk to come and campaign for them.
Okay. And Josh, there are so many other countries besides Canada that are being impacted by the tariffs that were announced today. A lot of our trading partners may even be banding together against the U.S., right? I mean, this is sort of like a global trade war.
Already, Errol, we're seeing that South Korea and Japan, which are, of course, United States allies, have started to have strong conversations with China. No real agreement yet. China obviously is considered an adversary, or at least a very strong competitor of the United States, and they are banding together. So it seems likely that those kinds of conversations will continue as there are more multilateral deals that don't involve the United States. One line that really struck me on this from the president is jobs and factories will come roaring back. We'll have to see. People right now are very concerned about the state of the economy. That really, according to a number of economists and surveys of Americans, the light is flashing yellow at this point, and inflation is not where we want it to be. There's a strong concern there. So we'll have to see if that really is the case. This is macroeconomics on a multilateral scale. Things are awfully complicated, and things also have the possibility of going wrong, as a number of economists who have been studying this for many years are predicting, Errol.
Yeah, it was pointed out, Josh, very interesting. The president had an auto worker step to the podium and describe what things were like in Macomb County in Michigan, the home of the Reagan Democrats, when they had a lot of closures of plants. Even under the best case scenario, though, it takes a couple of years to start building plants. So we'll have to see where all of this goes. Thanks very much to you, Josh. Thank you, Holly, Gregory.